certainly glad that you are here with us today. Andy Doss is a local historian with a passion for history. Since 2019, he has operated Bassett Looking Back, Moving Forward, a Facebook group dedicated to the history of Bassett, Virginia. He, along with Jared Marlowe, has operated the YouTube channel History and Sight since 2023. Since 2009, Andy has served as the registrar for the Colonel George Waller SAR chapter, and last year began his 5th term as chapter president. He has been on several boards of several organizations, including the Virginia Society of the War of 1812, the Virginia Society of the Sons of the American Revolution, the Martinsville-Henry County Historical Society, and the Martinsville-Henry County Academic Foundation. Andy serves as the director in the IT department at Bassett Furniture Industries, where he is a 4th-generation employee. While his hometown is Bassett, he now resides in Callens with his wife and 2 children. We are so fortunate that Andy finally decided to come to the Bassett Historical Center, and so now I give you Andy Doss.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming out today. And I was going to say that she said finally, because they've been asking me for a few years, and I've just been putting it off and not able to make it here. So I committed myself last year. I said, tell you what, I've been blowing you off for so long. I will do that, and I will do 2 this year. So I'm going to do another one sometime later.
And that's the least he could do.
That's the least I could do. Well, it didn't help the fact that I did a presentation for the colonial dames last year, right here. And then they let me know, oh, by the way, you still haven't done a presentation for us. So, that being said, as she said, I was doing a lot of research over the past few years on Bassett in particular. And of course, naturally, when you kind of come into that and you do research about things that are going around the different areas, what affected what businesses were affected, you end up with a lot of knowledge about other things. So I end up posting information about Edgewood, posting information about Firestone, and then you would get all kinds of responses about things like that. And I never really realized, like for example, in the case of Firestone, like how important that was for people, like as a story. And if you think about it, there literally is not anybody alive today that worked at Firestone. People lived there because a lot of times those what was left of Firestone, for example, people moved into those homes that were still there. So I've actually met people over the years that lived there. So there are plenty of people who know the area. And Edgewood, I don't know about you, but Edgewood to me is something I grew up as a kid. You just go around and see a road that says Edgewood. And other than that, I don't know anything else about it. So that's why I decided to put together this presentation to talk about some of these things. And I'm not going to tell you that I'm a 100 absolute expert on Firestone and Edgewood. I just thought I have enough information I can share with you that you might find it interesting. And I also want to let you know that I'm reading from my notes a lot here because I want to make sure that I'm giving you the full detail of what I've taken down, so I don't lose anything. But first I want to thank you all for coming, and just let you know, of course, as she introduced me, I grew up in Bassett. It's where I'm from. My mom and dad, Arlen and Emma, over here, and it's my mom's birthday. Happy birthday to my mother. I told her for her birthday I was doing a presentation on Edgewood and Firestone. So that way, yes, it's a very cheap birthday, at least for me. Mom, maybe I'll give you this brick. So genuine Firestone brick. You're the only person getting one for their birthday this year. So anyway, what I was going to say is history in this part of Virginia, it's not always a roadside marker, right? There's a lot that's hiding in plain sight. This is what I have learned doing this. It could be crumbling brick along a stream bank. Ask this gentleman right here who owns the property that Firestone is on. There's a lot of crumbling brick. And it could be a painted word on a board in somebody's field or pasture. It could be, as I've learned today, it could be a building that's being dismantled and a file cabinet with some papers you're going to rescue. Ask Kenny about that. So there's a lot of things that you start finding out as you unravel some of these stories. Let's see if I can figure out how to use this now. All right, what if an entire town disappeared? So do you ever feel like, I know I feel like this sometimes. Sometimes you look at Bassett and you think, if I look at Bassett in 1945 and I look at Bassett in 2026, feels like it's disappeared somewhat. There are still a lot of elements that are still there, but a lot of it's gone. But I guarantee you, if you were to dig around some, you'd find things that would surprise you. So now what we're talking about today are two towns. They were less than a mile apart. They don't exist on any modern maps. And that's, to me, one of the most fascinating things about studying something like this. You start looking, you go, wow, these places really meant something to a lot of people. And there's nothing anywhere that talks about what they were to the general public. They don't realize what was there and what has been buried. Now, I wanted to start off talking about Edgewood because of the two stories, Edgewood is the oldest. And it grew from over generations. It had colonial roots, eventually absorbed into what became Stanleytown. Again, we can say, where's Stanleytown now? There's not much left of that either. And Firestone was newer. It was built quick. It was built deliberately. It was a company town. It was created to house workers at a brick factory. That's it. That's the only reason why the town existed. And when the factory closed, the town had no reason to exist anymore. And it didn't. And now it doesn't. So it's two different stories and two different endings. Same result. So why do I care? This project meant a lot to me personally. You know, I do a history of the Sons of the American Revolution, things like that. That's how I started off doing research. I started doing Henry County research, branched into mostly Bassett research because that was my hometown, of course. And then you have people talk about stuff like that. I'm a total history nerd. So if you start talking about history things, I don't care what it is. A lot of times I'll talk to you about it with you. And you know, when you live a life like this, you accumulate things sometimes that you go, I don't know what I'm going to talk about this with somebody. Somebody somewhere cares about it, but I don't know who. So I'm glad you all turned out because it looks like you might care about it. So anyway, that being said, let's dig. And I say that truthfully because for some of this, you do have to dig. So let's talk a little bit about Edgewood and its a brief history of Edgewood. We'll take it back to the 1700s. And you hear a lot of people talk about Hickey's Ordinary. And we know that was somewhere around Hoardsville and Bassett. And you get there's a lot of opinions on where that was. First, an ordinary, by the way, it was just a tavern. That was another word for it. You had to have a license in order to operate one of those. And but back in the day, you've heard about the Great Road. It came down around this area. And first you have to think the Great Road was not a linear path. It split here and there. So there was a primary path and some side paths. One of those big paths went through the Edgewood area because that was so we know that because of the way that it grew up. And one of the primary landowners was there. The Henry County original courthouse was somewhere in that area. We don't know the exact location of those places. We just know it was the Barksdale farm. And that's where Barksdale's land was. And we do know the Moravians passed through there, and wagon traders would use that corridor frequently. And in 1756, young George Washington rode somewhere roughly around that area and was inspecting frontier forts during the French and Indian War. Not yet a general, by the way. Not yet even really particularly famous. In fact, he really wasn't that great of a commander. He got lucky a lot, but lucky enough that he became famous. And So really, there was no name for the land yet either, and it wasn't even Henry County at that point. So I mean, I guess it was Halifax County at that point. And then after the Revolution, that land was granted to Colonel George Waller. And in 1784, it passed to Major John Redd. Now, some of you who know our local Revolutionary history, these are all names you've all heard of. And the Redd family held it for about a century. Same family, same land, you know, for close to 100 years. So generations of people born and raised in that spot. Sometime around the 1830s, a stately brick mansion was built right above the ridge above the river flats. And in 1883, a tobacco man named Henry Clay Lester acquired about 500 acres on that spot. 4 years later, he transferred the property to John Robert Brown and his father, Frederick Reeves Brown. Some of y'all who know Martinsville history will know the Brown family names because they went on to become real prominent tobacco family in that area. But at this point, they were prominent more like in Franklin County. So the Brown family builds the Brown Schoolhouse near the railroad tracks, and eventually built a small school, another schoolhouse that they used for other purposes. There was two main schools in the area, and somewhere during all this time, they started calling it Edgewood. Honestly, nobody knows when that name was first used. It just started being called that. We found no document that says there was no ceremony that says, hey, this is Edgewood. It just people started calling that, and it stuck. And I like to, by the way, any questions while I'm doing this, if you feel free to raise your hand if you don't understand something I've said, or if you need me to go back. Feel free to interrupt. So by 1895, Edgewood had a real community. And so this was a computer rendering of what the area looked like, which I did based off of an actual map that we found, which I'm going to show in a minute. So what we do know, at this time, Jeremiah Holcomb had a general store, and his wife was the postmaster. And they ended up, so when you think about a general store of that area, that time, that's where you got your seed, your feed, your lamp oil, your thread, and plenty of conversation. So a lot of things, go ahead.
So Andy, what we're looking at on the screen here is that like?
I will show you I have a comparison map that I'm going to show because I know this can be confusing to look at.
Okay, so
Yeah, this.
So I interrupted you at the importance
That is
of the general
absolutely, and I will get to that right after this because yeah, this will make sense to you in just a minute. So also the mail didn't come easy in these areas. So the Norfolk and Western Railroad ran right through, but at the time it didn't stop for Edgewood on its own. So instead there was a mail crane that was beside the tracks. And then the way that worked, you've probably seen old videos. You had a steel arm, had a canvas bag hanging from it. Train come through. It would slow down a little bit, hook the bag, grab it, and then you would throw the new mail out, for the postmaster to get. And then precision and nerve. I mean, if you've ever seen these old videos, these guys leaning on a train and they're throwing these bags. I much respect these folks that did that kind of stuff. And now. Later on, they built a passenger shed. And if you don't know what a passenger shed is, basically it's a place you stood for the train to pick you up. There was no official stop. Like you actually stood outside and you either had a flag that was mounted that you would grab and flag the train down, or you waved a handkerchief in some places. That's how you stopped a train in those days for a shed station. There was no agent in it. There was nobody running it. It was just a building. So I think my next slide will give you a little bit better idea. But I'm going to use this map to explain kind of in comparison to today. So think of today, think of where the CVS is at Thomas B. Stanley Highway. So if you know what I'm talking about, you got the CVS right there, and you're heading up towards, like, say, Nelson, to the Toyota place. That road, that's the road I'm talking about. That is roughly what this is right here. Okay? This is it. So think of CVS being down here, and then you're going to drive up. These roads changed a little bit over the years, but this is roughly the same road that we're talking about. Smith River being down here, down this way. Does that make sense?
Where's
All right.
north?
Say that again?
Where's north?
This way.
Okay.
So this right here is Edgewood Road today. Okay? Now, this is the part that's a little weird because people go, what is this road? That part confused me. I didn't know what that road was when I first started looking at this. I thought, what in the world is this? All right, so I'll explain that as well. So in January of 1899, a man named John LeFew got hit by a train. So there was a lawsuit that ensued as part of this. And so Norfolk and Western got sued, and they had to then make a map. And what they did, it's a very detailed map. It shows exactly where they found his body. It also gives a measurement of how much feet is in between each section. So you actually know by looking at the map, if you position yourself where the road is, you can actually measure almost where the Holcomb General Store, which is this, and the Reeves Brown Tobacco Factory. These were the two big anchoring points for Edgewood, which is why I based this rendering on that. Holcomb Store is first, Tobacco Factory is second. And a sidetrack. So the 1899 map helps us approximate the locations of where the Holcomb and Brown building was. So using that math, I could come up with approximately the location of where those two buildings would have been located. So think about where Food Line is today, where the Edgewood Road is today. Those two buildings were roughly in that area right there. Now, is this making sense? Okay. Now, again, you may see there's another road going out to the left over here. This is a road that hardly anybody around today will remember. So anyway, John LeFew, when he died, I'm sure he never had any idea that his death would help us uncover a lot of these stories. So the railroad track ran across the bottom of the image. That's still there. And if you see them, I've marked the railroad track in yellow. But as you've noticed, if you're looking at the modern map today, that railroad track goes down towards the river. But in those days, the railroad track went almost straight to Bassett, followed Edgewood all the way, went right through what we think of today as the Stanley Furniture plant. It went right through the middle of the plant.
They changed it in 1960, or about 1960, when they built the curve around along the river where it is now.
Yep.
And the reason why is because Stanley Furniture wanted to expand.
Yep.
And there was a lot of congestion in the area where the main track was at the time. So, of course, the decision was made to change it and move the main line to the river.
So it's a long forgotten route that a lot of people don't remember. Is the fact that for you to drive to Martinsville, you actually followed the road by what became the Stanley Furniture Lumber Yard. Like when you all pass, when you're heading towards, like, say, Food Line, Nelson, that area, if you look up, you got the water tower on top of the hill. Well, you wouldn't have saw that back in those days. It would have been on your left because you would have went on the other side of it to get where you were going, because there was no road access to get there before the date that he said there. So part of that, so let me get to that story. So I call this the Shadow Falls. This is when the shadow is on Edgewood. The first real sign of trouble for Edgewood came in 1918. The post office closed. So Miss Holcomb was no longer the postmaster, and there was no more Edgewood post station. All the mail was rerouted to Bassett at that point, at least for a while. And then if you think about it, if you don't have a post office, that's already part of your identity that's kind of went away. So then in 1924, things really started to change. Thomas B. Stanley, son-in-law of John D. Bassett, later governor of Virginia, founded Stanley Furniture. And he wanted to build I always think this is funny, he wanted to build a town that could rival Bassett. And he intended to name it Stanley. But if you know your geography, there's already a town in Virginia called Stanley in Page County. So he couldn't name it Stanley, so he put the word town on the end. So he had to just be happy with Stanleytown. So Stanleytown it was. And as Stanleytown grew, the road to Martinsville, the one we were talking about, that's when that was started to be rerouted. The old Edgewood Road, which had been the main artery that whole time for over a century, was bypassed to create a new, more direct route, what we all use today to get through the area. So what happens when you don't have to go through a place anymore? You stop going through it. And when people stop coming through a community, that's when the community starts to shrink. There was no more reason for people to go to Edgewood. Now, so in 1924, to try to coincide with the Stanley Furniture opening, Walter Watt Smith, he got together with with Claude Stanley, and they founded what would later become the Stanley Mercantile, but at the time they called it Smith and Stanley. And when they put in their advertisement, they said coming to Edgewood. And that's one of the last references I can see to like a business being formed in Edgewood. So if you're trying to figure out where that is, do you remember right across from the Stanley Furniture plant for years, I used to call it the Yellow Brick Building. It was an old yellow building right there. The precursor to that was this. So they started off with a small brick building, and they basically built onto it until they created that building that some of us still remember. Some of us old people like me still remember. So when they, like I said, they still called it Edgewood, but I'm telling you, right after that, nobody was calling it Edgewood anymore. That whole area became known as Stanleytown. Nobody stood in front of Stanley Furniture and thought, oh, this is Edgewood. Nobody called it that anymore. It was Thomas Stanley and his family and all the business heads made sure that, hey, this is Stanleytown, and that's what it's going to be called. So this right here is Stanley Furniture as it looked in 1930. This is looking south. Again, this picture kind of shows what I'm talking about. I'm going to highlight it here in a second. That is the original building that was there. That's the original building that would later become the Stanleytown Mercantile Police Station. All that was torn down, I think, in 83. Do you remember when that was torn down? I think it was 83 when it...
They tore it down when they built that Winn-Dixie store down there.
Okay, so that would have been about that time. And if you look over on the left-hand side, you see the main road goes around the plant just as it does today, but then it disappears over to the left. Here I highlighted it for you to make it a little more obvious. So you can see the road, and you can see how the road direction went around that way. Let me know if I'm in your way. If you can see it. Okay. Anyway, that's to me, and I got this too. I'm going to pass this around so that you can kind of see some of these. If you wouldn't mind, just kind of pass it down. There's not a lot of pages in there. I know I'm going through these slides, and it's a lot to look at.
Your little Edgewood Station building's right up in the upper left-hand corner.
Yep, and the Edgewood Station. And we will talk about that too. The Edgewood Passenger Station. All right. So one of the things, so I got this picture years ago, and I didn't even know what that was because I was completely focused on Stanley Furniture as the plant. I was just doing research on Stanley Furniture, and I know when Jared and I started looking at Edgewood's information about Edgewood, we kept seeing references to the Edgewood Station, and I was looking at this map, this picture, and I remember telling Jared, I was like, Jared, I think that must be the train station that's out there, that little building. And it just so happened, whoever took this picture ended up capturing that train station in that picture. So I zoomed in on it right there. But fortunately, we were fortunate enough here at the Bassett Historical Center that they have a photo of it. And even better. So now I've introduced you to the Edgewood passenger shed. It's pretty simple. It's kind of hard to tell from here, but all you had basically was you had the front that said Edgewood. You had a roof. Both sides though were open. So all you basically, if you wanted to wait for the train, you walked up the steps. You stood there to keep out of the rain or whatever. And even part of the back only goes halfway down because you can see the tree behind it. Kerman Thomason put this photo in his book that he wrote about Edgewood because his family lived, his grandpa or great grandpa lived in the old mansion. But that picture was in there, and then I was able to pull that out and enhance it a little bit so it looked better. But there you go. And I just think that's so cool to see this old station, especially since for years I only knew about the little blurry picture that I had right there. Any questions before I move on?
Who were the people standing?
I can't remember their names. He's got them in his book. That book is out here, but I think he did put their names in there. I think they're his family members. All right. So until the late 1940s, again, I like to talk about the road because I think that's an important part of the story. All traffic led to Edgewood, and in the 1940s, they started cutting the new road, and so for a while you had two roads, and so you had two ways that you could go at that point. And then the old road that went to Edgewood, you see I like to be very detailed with my maps. The old road, here it is, here it's still going. This is the early 1960s. The old road is here, and the road that we all use today is here. And this road right here became owned by Stanley Furniture. And it remained a public road for a little while, and then eventually it was cut off and became factory traffic only. And then nobody could go down that road anymore after a while. Everybody had to go on the way that we use today. So by the 1960s, so here's some of the reasons, by the way. By the 1960s, Stanley Furniture had doubled in size. And the main line was rerouted to follow the Smith River as it does if you look at a map today. And the old main line became a branch line for the factory. So you actually, so the train could go right through the middle of the plant if it needed to pick up furniture or drop off supplies. Finished trucks and things like that would go through there. And I just think that's also fascinating stuff to learn because you kind of think of things growing up, well, the railroad line's always been there, but it hasn't. And if you look at it today, so now who has seen the old mansion up here before? Okay, so that's still there. The Champeau family lives in there, and they keep it up. It's in great shape. I took a tour of it a few months ago, and I don't know about you, but I always grew up thinking either the road or this. This like you'd say Edgewood, and I go, oh yeah, that's this house. That's this house right here, and
So
part of
when was the house built?
in 1830s. Yep. So it's a pretty significantly old house for Martinsville, Henry County. That's Hordsville. That's a different house.
This one on Stage Road?
Yeah, this one's on Stage Road. So if you go by where Hardee's is in Stanleytown, and you go before you get to the church, it's the road that goes up right there. So that house is still there. It's in good shape. Again, this is what I think of when I think of Edgewood, but there's more to the story than this building. Now, Edgewood Drive runs mostly along the original road as it is today. So there's still echoes of the past. Norfolk Southern still calls this section Edgewood. So if you go over there and you look over as you drive, you'll see the sign still says Edgewood. So when you hear, if you ever listen to if you're a nerd like my son and you listen to railroad traffic on the radio, they'll mention the Edgewood station as they go by. So it's pretty interesting to listen to. Remnants of the standing furniture line. So next time you're over there, stop and you'll see the railroad tracks that go right into the factory. Most of it's been pulled up, but there's still a few the line right in the right of way is still there. But if you keep going towards Edgewood, it just turns into a ditch. You can see where it used to connect, but it's all pretty much gone now. But I walked over there in the rail. There's a little 8-foot section of rail or something that's still there. Okay, now here's one of the fun parts of the story. There's more to this story. All right. So remember the one I was telling you about the passenger station. So what happened was that thing was scheduled for demolition in 1955. And but they actually closed off all passenger travel at that point. So you couldn't use that shed. And Norfolk Western was like, we got to do something with the shed. We're going to tear it down. And that's where this story takes an interesting turn. So who here knows who Claude T. Stone was? Because some people are familiar with the name. So Claude was a son of Reed Stone, and he lived in the old mansion up there on the hill, and who was Reed had built, and I just love this story because I went to Campbell Court Elementary School, and a lot of you did too, and a lot of you are familiar with this Ascot Drive that's right there, which takes you right to Campbell Court. Well, there's this very homely looking chicken house that's right there on the left that has been there since I was in elementary school. Never really thought much about it. It's battered, weathered structure, and boards gray. You look at this thing and you really don't think anything about it. Now, I'm revisiting this because Edgewood Station, you remember me talking about the Edgewood Station. So Claude decided that, he decided he wanted that building. So he hauled it to the estate where it became destined to live out its days in the most humble manner. The shed still lives. You can still see the word Edgewood on the side of the chicken house. You see he made a few modifications to it along the way, built a little window in there. But the old train shed is still there. And that's, to me, an amazing part of the story. You can still...
Maine used to have one very similar to that, but I've never seen a picture of it, don't know anything about whatever happened to it. But over near the Bassett Walker there, near the Speedway, there was a stop called Fontaine.
Okay, yeah.
And they had a shelter shed there for a
Yep,
while.
wonder what happened to that
I
one.
don't have no idea.
Maybe it's a chicken house.
Well, don't know what the same size as that
Yeah.
one, let's say, or what, but there were a number of them between
Yeah.
us and Salem and Roanoke.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very
That's a popular, cheap way to do business.
Yeah.
So that's the shed. You see they added on to it to make to expand it out, but that's what's left of the shed right there. They just added a few things on, and there you go, a chicken house. Now, any questions? I could tell you. So the only reason why I even knew the story of the chicken house is when Bob Haley sold the Reed Stone home. He contacted me and we were talking about it. He invited me up to. He had some books he wanted to give me, and he goes, have you ever seen the chicken house? I was like, no, but I've got chickens. And he goes, yeah, but this is special. So then he showed me the Edgewood writing was still in the building. It blew my mind. I was like, I cannot believe that thing used to be the train station. All right, so I'm going to move on to Firestone. So any questions about this before I go too far? All right, I'm taking that as, Andy, you talk a lot, move on. Let me take some water. Okay, Firestone, clay, coal, and rail. So now we're going to move on to the second of the story of the lost villages. So if you think an Edgewood story is about a community that grew slowly over generations and was gradually absorbed by forces beyond its control, we got the same situation here with Firestone, but with a little bit of a twist. In a way, it was in control of its destiny. So it was purpose built and only built for one specific function, and that's exactly how the town ended as well. Clay, coal, and rail is what drove Firestone. At the beginning of the 20th century, Henry County, of course, as you're well aware, was experiencing an industrial boom. You had textile mills going up, furniture factories, and the way they, if you've seen over here old pictures of Bassett when they built their first plant, it was a wood frame building, burned up. So, manufacturers were really looking for ways like, how do I make my my business more permanent? And brick was the way to do that. So, so fires, of course, were a constant threat. And so all around the country, brickyards were popping up to support this growth. So there were three men who saw the opportunity and came together in a meeting to meet this. Joshua Hedgecock brought the craft knowledge. He was an experienced brickmaker. In fact, like his whole family, if you look at research about Mr. Hedgecock, they were all over the state of Virginia and North Carolina making bricks. His father, his brothers, everybody. It's just funny. You think about the Bassetts and furniture. These guys were brick. And Emmett Williamson was a banker. So he became the financier of the operation. And then R.A. Fontaine owned all the land, which is how he got involved in this business. So they created what was at the time going to be called Williamson, Hedgecock, and Fontaine. So as early as 1904, we start seeing this operation ramp up. So in 1904, J.C. Steele and Sons, by the way, that company's still around. They made equipment like for shaping brick, molding brick, polishing brick, that sort of thing. They had a trade magazine that they would advertise in, and they used a quote from Williamson and Hedgecock that basically said that they, gentlemen, we are well pleased with the machine bought of you last summer, have made some brick with it that would go most anywhere for repressed brick. It is the very machine for our clay, and we hope to figure out with you real soon for a larger machine of the same make and style in order to treble our capacity by spring. Yours very truly, Williamson, Hedgecock, and Fontaine. So 1904 was a long time ago. And so they weren't even incorporated at this point, which happened the next year in 1905. So in 1905, they must have been really rolling. They decided to incorporate. And then in 1912, Fontaine got out of it because at the same time, the clay deposits in Fontaine were starting to deplete. And this was their primary operation, so they had a problem. And so in 1922, Williamson and Hedgecock secured a new future by acquiring a 45-acre site near Edgewood, just south of Bassett, along the Smith River. So it had two main advantages: lots of clay, and it had a Norfolk Western rail line going by there as well. And anyway, then they needed workers. So the workers came. The workers needed homes. And so here's a photo of, by the way, this is not perfect track layout, but this gives you a general idea of how big this operation was. The red area, roughly how the actual brick operation itself was laid out. The community being quite a bit larger than that. I'm not a draftsman, so you have to forgive me for what I did there. So they ended up building the Firestone operation. 50,000 bricks a day capacity. 530-foot rail sidetrack, dryer section, kilns, and coal storage. So of course they also had, because they had the sidetrack, they could do loading and transport. They had a dedicated coal storage. So this is not a small thing. This is a pretty significant operation for the area. And it was a serious industrial machine, and they meant to continue high volume production. So this is another view of it. You can see what will later become the brick row houses up behind it, but this is actually taken from a different angle. These two photos befuddled me for a long time because I thought they might be two separate operations, but then I realized that the exact same buildings are in the photo. The same three buildings and smokestack appear, just different angles in here. And so I just find all this fascinating that this kind of operation was going on. So the long kiln building stretches almost the entire width of the frame. And so you had coal furnaces that kept the kilns by temperature day and night. This one, you can see the railroad cars. They're sitting on part of that sidetrack over there. And so you had skilled workers, laborers, supervisors, and then you ended up with homes to support that. So they had 20 to 30 modest company-owned homes all along a single dirt road. They had their own non-agent freight station as well. It wasn't as significant as the Edgewood one. And then in 1929, Robert and George Wright electrified Firestone. Who here is familiar with the Wrights, by the way? Okay. So the Wrights, they took it upon themselves to just wire up everything. And it's pretty astounding story in itself to learn about. So I always put these names here because I say encourage you to look these folks up sometime to learn more about the people that kind of made not just Firestone, but Bassett, all kinds of places around here. True pioneers. And then this was one of the things that really sparked my interest. So over at Bassett Furniture, we have a huge amount of archives, and I've been given access to those archives, and I'm probably the only person in 50 years that has even cared about these old documents. And so for the past 6 years, I've been digging through these things, and there was an old roll top desk that was over in one of the storage facilities over here, and it turns out it was J.D. Bassett's old desk. And basically, when J.D. Bassett left Bassett, when he retired, he left his desk and all of his like personal and business papers. He just left in the desk. So and what blows my mind, if that was like 1930 and nobody touched the desk, and all of his stuff was still in it. Well, at some point, somebody knocked the desk over on its back. So all of the papers that were in it all fell to the bottom of the roll top desk. And then people would throw stuff into it, because it was a tempting thing. It was an empty thing. People just threw stuff over in there. And I went in there and was looking at it, and I pulled some of all that junk off of it. And in it was all these balled up papers. They were just dusty and dirty, the kind of thing, and I mean it, I would put my hand in there, bring my hand out, and my hands were black with dirt and dust. It was gross. And my pants, I was always wearing my my work clothes when I went over there, so I'd come back covered in this stuff. And everybody knew where I'd been. And not doing my day job, I was over at the warehouse. And as I was looking through there, I found this one drawer that still was in its upright position. And I pulled out all the old papers. And as it turned out, J.D. Bassett had helped fund the building of the Bassett Baptist Church, what they called the Missionary Baptist Church back in those days, which became over here where Harder's Drugstore, used to be, is where the old church used to be. Well, J.D. Bassett helped fund that building. And because of that, he handled all of the financial things that were coming in. So, that whole, after I got done with this, so first let me explain. Imagine a balled up piece of paper. Then you take that balled up piece of paper and you flatten it out. Then you end up with a stack that looks about this big of papers. And after you flatten it, it's this big, right? So I basically took all these papers, flattened them out, I found heavy weights to put on top of them and left them for weeks so that they would just flatten out. By the time it was said and done, just for the Bassett Baptist Church construction, I had Lester supplies. I had all kinds of electrical people's invoices, really fascinating stuff, beautiful letterheads, you name it. All this stuff was just, to me, just beautiful. But the thing that really fascinated me was I turned to it and there was this bill for bricks that had been purchased and a bright red logo, W&H Incorporated, Firestone, Virginia, facing brick, a specialty. Never have seen this anywhere else. I've never seen this logo in color anywhere. And yeah, I kind of thought to myself, thank you, J.D. Bassett, for being such a hoarder, because he had all this stuff. And if he had thrown it away, we wouldn't have this information. So with that, I'm going to pass around the original documents. So what you have here there are 2 Norfolk Western Bill of Ladings, and then 2 orders for Williams and Hedgecock bricks from July 21st, 1922 and July 22nd, 1922. So I'm going to give you I think one of Bassett's most precious set of documents. You pass it around, take a look, because I think it's a pretty cool thing. As you can see, I'm kind of passionate about the documents, and we have so many of them over there. Very few Firestone related documents, and this is the vast majority. I found one more where JD had a conversation with one of the Hedgecock family members, but it wasn't totally significant. So anyway, I always say this is Firestone in living color, right? Because I actually have where they designed this red brick logo, which I just think is so cool. Now, here's where things you see, it didn't last very long. So the golden years, they weren't going to last. The decline didn't start with some dramatic event. It started with the changing of how business was done. So at first, J.A. Hedgecock decides he's not going to be president anymore. He steps back and becomes vice president. His son, Emory Hedgecock, he took over as president. So as you can see, they were setting this up to be a continuous empire. Now, E.L. Hedgecock decides to go on a fishing trip with his best friend in 1935, and he goes out at Lover's Leap, and there was a mill pond out there, and they were in a canoe, and the canoe capsizes, and both men drowned. That was one of the biggest hits to the Hedgecock factory, because J.A. Hedgecock was already up in age at this point, and then he dies in 1941. They had, by this point, renamed it to Hedgecock Brick Company, but its momentum was already lost. They had opened up Madison Shell Brick. Who's ever heard of Madison Shell Brick, by the way? That was if you have any North Carolina roots, that was a big, huge thing in North Carolina. It almost went belly up, and it sold to Pine Hall Brick. Who knows what Pine Hall Brick is? Lots of people today still have their homes built with brick from Pine Hall Brick. So Pine Hall was a big, huge operation. And you can almost say Pine Hall is rooted in Hedgecock. So new construction materials, change in styles, consolidation, small brickyards just disappeared. Then in 1949, what was left of the business, which was still in operation running out of the Henry Hotel over in Martinsville, they had a little office over there. All that was sold to Roanoke Webster Brick. Nothing left. All of the materials were sold. Fires burned out. Just to give you an example of some of the life around here, we still had some homes for a while that survived after the brickyard left. Some of the houses were still there. Much of them were torn down. These photos here are of there's a woman. I go to church with a woman named Peggy Marlowe, and she grew up in Firestone. This is oops, sorry. That's her with some of her family members when she was younger. These are one of the brick homes that stood out in Firestone, and they were very livable at the time. But in 1968, an article came out which gives us an idea of what happened after everybody left. The reporter reported 12 homes swallowed by vines, found a child's rusted toy in the woods, a pair of men's boots, and a collapsing shed. Abandoned brick row houses. He took a photo of that and put it in the paper. None of these were livable by this time. Abandoned general store. Now, today, this fella could tell you a lot about this. Because I try to imagine when Thomas B. Stanley was running a farm out here, he probably ran into bricks all the time. But one of my favorite things about this is when Mr. Rayon took me and Jared out on his property, and he owns the Firestone property, and we just walked around, and there were bricks everywhere. I guess every time it rains or something, a little bit more comes sticking out. But you see pieces of brick. There are whole bricks, bricks that are just buried. I think you said there's a path of bricks, right? There's like a path of bricks that's now under the dirt. It's a completely fascinating thing. I'm telling you, it's weird. Did I mention bricks are everywhere? So here's just right where the trees just growing around one of the foundations, some mortared bricks there. Now, and the proof is still there, and that's what's kind of cool. It's a little hard to see out here looking, but these are pretty significantly deep indentations in the ground. Think of like if you go to like a Civil War battlefield and you see earthworks. It's almost exactly like that. It's flat, then a hill that's flat, then a hill, and that's where the dryers, kilns, and brick stacks were laid out. So all those impressions are still there. Because here's one, here's the hill, here's an indentation, there's a hill, indentation, a hill, and so it's pretty obvious, something went on there. And unless you know the story, you won't know why in the world those things were there. The sidetrack retaining wall, still there. Another view of it. Again, all this is age. Some of it's fallen in, but it's still amazing to walk through there and see all this stuff. So let me bring the two stories together. So two villages less than a mile apart, both gone from the maps, but both are still present in the landscape. Edgewood has echoes. The old brown mansion, still there. Still call it Edgewood. Edgewood Drive follows the original road. We got the chicken house. It's not over at Edgewood, but there's still part of that memory still lives. Firestone, scattered bricks, kiln foundations, the offloading wall, railroad embankments. Firestone Drive is named in its honor over there today. And but both places, they may be erased from the maps, but they still whisper from the ground. And a few final thoughts. Why this matters. Edgewood and Firestone are not curiosities. They're not, to me, they're just not interesting footnotes in a regional history. They're fingerprints of the working people who built this county. Brickmakers, tobacco farmers, store clerks, postmasters, and the railroad workers. Families who lived in company houses, raised their children, made their whole lives around industries that eventually moved on without them. And these stories do not get told unless someone tells them. Our local history is fragile. And it disappears when nobody writes it down. Nobody asks the questions. When someone with the history knowledge decides to keep it to themselves and not pass it on. And when nobody thinks to look carefully at an old bill of lading tucked away into a furniture patriarch's personal papers. So to me, this is what history activism is. You got to be the person who looks and who asks and who likes to get dusty. And how can you help? Here's my plug. You can subscribe and follow mine and Jared's YouTube channel. And if you don't know how to do that, bring your phone up here or bring it to Jared. We'll show you how to subscribe. Also, we have lots of societies around here that we have the Martinsville Henry County Historical Society. If you have any questions about that, you can ask Holly back here. Then we have the Bassett Historical Center, which is a good repository of historical items and genealogical information. I will do my best to help with any questions that you have, as would my partner Jared over here. I'm going to let you also know that we have Murphy Roney here. We also have Billy. I'm sorry I forgot your last name back here. He's got some photos. And we have Kenny over here who's got some original Firestone rail documents from Norfolk Western as well. You had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. This is fantastic. Thank you for all the work you guys have done.
You're welcome.
If you go back to that one landscape picture that you've got that shows Firestone, looking basically toward the north, the far right-hand corner.
I'm sorry, this one?
No, sir. Go way back. It's a black and white photograph. Keep on. It's way back in your presentation, but that's it right there.
Okay.
To me, it's another fascinating side story about that. You have to get a magnifying glass if you look at the picture real closely. But on the right-hand side of this picture,
I'll leave this up on this if y'all want to come up and look at it.
that right there is a steam shovel. And that's what they used to actually mine the property. And the interesting side note about that is when the governor bought that property, I forgot what year, but he paid $5,000. He got a great deal. But out of all the equipment for Firestone, when he bought the property, if you look at the documents, it says that he was going to give them a reasonable amount of time to get rid of all that equipment. But he kept the steam shovel. I don't know why. I thought it was kind of cool. But by deed, he was allowed to keep the steam shovel. And it's just, you never know what you can find because you have to use a magnifying glass to look at some of these pictures if you're past 20, like I'm 30 now. So I use a magnifying glass. But it's really cool when you look at that. You see the steam shovel. And then if you look at LiDAR pictures, you can go on the U.S. Geological Survey website. They mined the you-know-what out of that property. You can see it from the drag lines. So some people said there's Indian mounds. There's no mounds on that property. It's all this differential mining methods that they use from the steam shovel. But it's just neat. When you look at this stuff, you keep getting more and more information, and it's like, I wish somebody could tell us, why did the governor keep the steam shovel? Was it was he going to make a garden with it? I don't know. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
So Murphy also, he's got a couple of items with him, but if you want to talk to him about some of the things, he's done a lot of digging, obviously, on his property, and he's found a lot of iron objects and things that are from the operation, maybe before, some parts of homes and some things like that, some that date from before Firestone. So he's got a wealth of knowledge of things that he's uncovered over there as far as what's sitting under the dirt. I don't, I'm not going to commit him to this, but I think he probably wouldn't mind if you needed to go out there, if you want to put on a good pair of shoes, he'd be happy to show you around probably.
Grab all the bricks you want. When I mow it, I've ruined tons of blades.
So he's got a
the place grows bricks.
he's got a brick problem. So I grabbed this brick. So if you want to come up and take a look at this is an original Firestone brick as well. Just one I pulled out of the ground. This is probably not in the best shape. There are probably bricks that are in way better shape than this out there. I just didn't have time to. I didn't want to get out big or digging in his property. Anyway, you got the two documents. I think they're back here in the back now. So if you want to get a better look at those, you can look at them. I'll get you just a second. And I'm going to leave this screen up. I think this is the best one to leave up. I'll leave that one up.
I wanted to mention something about Firestone being with the railroad stuff like I am. Up until recently, you may notice if you look closely alongside the train track, you have a concrete pier about maybe 3 foot tall with nothing on it. You think, well, what's that big hump of a triangle shaped pier standing there along the track for? Those used to be signal towers which were like about a mile apart years ago. Firestone had a signal tower. If you ride down Firestone Drive and the road goes around up toward the governor's house, curves up to the left on the hill, railroad goes around to the right where the plant was. There, unless it's moved recently, there's one of those concrete piers still there where a signal tower stood. And
I don't know, is it?
A few years
Okay.
ago, whenever the maintenance way trucks or whoever was on the track, train master, whoever mostly,
Right.
would say, well, I'm stopping at milepost so-and-so between the yard at Payne, which is Fieldale, where the train yard is now, and Firestone. They would mention Firestone many, many times. And up until just the last few years, they've changed those signals to where they're further apart. So like Andy mentioned, you see the one down there when you come down the hill by the Dollar General across the track, to your left is a signal that has Edgewood Road on the sign now, which he showed earlier in
Yep.
the program.
Yeah, there used to be up till 2009. There used to be the Firestone
Yeah,
sign used to be
A
there.
few years ago.
Yeah.
They would mention Firestone, the radio frequencies for the railroad.
Yep, Norfolk
Many,
Southern took
many
that one.
times.
Took
I'd
that
be
one
at the
out.
house and they'd have the thing on and they'd say, well, gotta do something at Firestone. We got a little repair, work on the track there, some small area or
Yep.
something. Well, we gotta get on past the signal at Firestone and find the next
Yep.
side track because the train's coming down the main line.
I wonder what they did with that Firestone sign.
I don't know. Never did find out.
Yeah, they probably put it in some storage somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right.
Unfortunately, a lot of that stuff, when they redone a lot of the track and modernized it, like you had right there, you're talking about the main line going through Stanley Furniture. Years ago, most of your side tracks had switch stands that were manually operated. Now it's all electronic.
Yeah.
Train pulls up and they gotta pull in on the passing side. Somebody in Atlanta or somewhere now changes the track for you. You don't do it yourself unless it's a very old side
Right.
that they wanna keep that way.
Right.
But for years, like Stanley Furniture on the north end toward the office section had a high switch stand, which you got up and it's probably about this tall with a red painting on one side, green on the other for stop and go, of course, yellow and caution. You had a handle where you pulled it up, you pulled it around, that manually switched your track.
Yeah.
I've got one of those at the house.
That's what everybody needs at their house.
It came from Stanley Furniture when I found out they were gonna.
When you
take
need
those
to,
up.
when you're gonna disperse that at some point in your life, I know a little boy who wants it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's a lot of that stuff that unfortunately got thrown away. Signs, you mentioned
Yeah.
the signs.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of things that, I remember going in the station at Kohler, which was right behind Garfield's Restaurant. There was a depot there for years. And it was a junction point between the Norfolk and Western and the Danville and Western line when it went on the street.
right. Yep.
Mr. Charlie Orr was one of the last agents in that building. I remember talking to him when I was a kid. Going in there and there was gobs of papers everywhere. Train books, laden books, bills, everything, you name it. But unfortunately, when they tore a lot of those buildings down, Firm's another example, Henry, lots, they just gathered it all, threw it all away.
Yep.
And it's a lot of stuff that could have been saved, but
All right.
unfortunately it wasn't.
Well, look, so I'm closing out my presentation, and I appreciate everybody coming. You see, there's other people here that can talk to you about other historical things that I think are all valuable to know, valuable stories that we need to talk to Kenny and people like that to kind of get those stories and memorize them. You had a question, didn't you?
No, actually,
Okay,
you answered
okay.
it. I was just trying to organize in my thoughts where Firestone was, but to me, it's like across the Smith River from the textile plants there and Whippy Acres. It sounds like it's right across the Smith
No,
River.
it's
not
that far down.
Not that far down.
No.
Okay.
No, you go out Riverside Drive, You know where the Dollar General is in Stanley Town when you come down the hill from the light and
Yes,
food line?
yes.
Turn left right there on Riverside, on Firestone Drive.
Uh-huh.
Going out a little ways, and the village area was kind of on the left where the old stage road came down the hill from the mansion he had pictured. And there was some houses in that area, but you go on out and the road curves around up to the left.
Yeah, so,
got you.
you're right.
I think he's got it kind of,
So, yeah, you would start up here,
yeah.
come this way. So the new Firestone Road is right here, which comes up off of 57 up there. You would come down and you can get on Firestone Drive. But Stanley Furniture would be up that way, for example.
Yeah, I got you. And
Okay.
Bassett Forks is
But where the road curves around and goes up further up to where the Governor Stanley's home is on the right, the road curves
Yeah.
to the left, the railroad curves to the right. It was out in between that. I call it a
Right.
Y.
And Fort-
So not in between that.
Fort Troll Baptist Church.
all
there.
right, yes.
Okay. Anybody that saw my April Fool's post and believed it. So
Some of them did.
some people believed it. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Go ahead. Well, so, thank you. Appreciate it. I have one more question though. What was?
You turn left where Stanley Furniture was, and you go up Edgewood Drive, and you look off to the right, you're gonna see the railroad tracks. And behind that was an old lumber yard. Big, that they still mow every year, there's still bush hog. Was anything there? Was that part of any?
Is that part of your?
No, I know what you're talking about. That's further upstream from my property. You can go to the USGS website and you can see the topographical maps that show all the houses, all the structures from the 20s and the 30s, and even when they got ruined before the governor had them taken down in the 60s, I guess. But that was further upstream. And the mining area, they mine in other places, but when you read about it, but primarily the mining area was the 50 acres between the railroad track and the river. And that weird S-curve across the river from Whitby Acres. That's where they did the mining. But you can go back through there now and you still see all the housing foundations and all sorts of stuff. It's all still there.
I'm sorry. I did miss this, by the way. This slide right here. I must have skipped through it. But Ruth Stanley became Stanleytown's first postmaster. This was the sign of the times for Stanleytown. And then all of the Brown Farm was auctioned off. So that's when all the subdividing and stuff started happening after John R. Brown died.
What
So-
year was that?
I think that was, hold on, that was,
You know, they put some up at the anyway. See the sign that says, "Oh, sir."
Yes.
that was 1927.
Yeah. Wait till the typewriter's dropping a one or something.
Wow.
So same year the post office opened for Stanleytown was the same year that all the Edgewood property started to disappear.
Did you notice the time of the auction? Somebody stuck the one.
Yeah, I know. I saw that too.
Morning, that's a little early.
Yep.
Oh, they may have one.
All right. Thank you everybody for coming. I know I've kept you long enough, so thank you so much.